Hey guys, it's Ben here with the Half Court Heave podcast. I'm here with just Arjun today. Isaac's at the beach maybe, but anyways, Arjun, how are you doing today? He's beating me in fantasy football, by the way.
I'm killing him in fantasy football, but I think you guys have noticed this new mic. It's nice.
You
My
got a new
quality's gonna sound.
microphone.
It's not gonna be ass anymore. It's gonna be great.
It's gonna be so
So we're
great.
looking forward to
Yeah,
that.
but soon we will be incorporating football soon. That's the whole fantasy football for Arjun initiative. But anyways, before we talk about our first topic, let's talk about our merch. It's great. It's comfortable. I think everybody in the whole crew now has it. It's cheap. You can get a hoodie for $25, and we have shirts with Arjun's face coming in very soon. And that's basically all I have to say about it. The link's in our bio of the
$1
YouTube
shirt
video.
too.
Go ahead and like this video. There's a ton of topics in the description. Go like the video, go watch all those, and tell us how you think this episode went. But anyways, let's just get into our first topic, which would be our perfect off seasons for the Warriors. As you might know, we're doing one of these for every team. We did the Celtics last time, but Arjun, tell me your perfect off season for the Golden State Warriors.
Well, my perfect off season. We'll start with the trades. Now, the Warriors, in my opinion, are a team that's possible of contending, but they still have some things to do. Now, Ben had talked about it earlier in a past episode about drafting Denny Adrigida, how you say his name. He is probably the best fit for them, but I would not settle for him. So I'm proposing trading him and Marquise Chris for John Collins from Atlanta. The reason I'm saying John Collins is because he can move. He's mobile, and that's perfect for Steve Kerr's system. You don't want a massive big, but you want size in your team. That's why they didn't want Wiseman. So with that, let's get to the draft. Now,
Yeah.
the draft, I would definitely just the Hawks would probably want Denny Adv. I'm not even gonna say it. I'm not even gonna say it.
Just say Denny. Just say Denny. Just say Denny.
Yeah, Denny. Just draft Denny and the pick 48 for round 2 and 51. These don't really matter, but Emmanuel Quickly and Ashton Haggins, hell, you might even be able to maybe develop them into solid players. Now free agency, important one. I say this will be a little bit of a burden a tax burden for the Warriors, but I'm saying you should get DJ Augustine for $5 million for 2 years. I think DJ Augustine's a perfect backup point guard. He puts up 10 points per game. He gives you solid production. Someone just lift a little bit of a burden off of Curry. And then I have Jeremy Grant, sign him for $10 million for 2 years. He is a great bench player. We've all seen what he could do in the playoffs. He's amazing. Now, that's it. So the starting lineup, before I give it to Ben, starting lineup will look like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, John Collins, and Draymond Green.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
would be Jeremy Grant.
All right. So I think that was a pretty good one, but there were some things I disagreed with. But without disagreeing with you, I'll just get straight into mine. So I think there would be 3 open roster spots going into the offseason. I would make one trade and one trade only, and that would be Marquise Chris, Jordan Poole, and pick 48 for Robert Covington. That might be a little too little for Robert Covington. You might think he's a very valuable 3-and-D player. But I think that with the Rockets, what I think they'll be doing is if they don't get Joel Embiid, they'll rebuild. So I would think that they could give away Robert Covington for that cheap price, since they do get 2 young pieces and a second-round pick in the deepest draft we've seen in a while. But then going to the draft, I'm drafting Denny. And then with round 2, pick 51, I'm having Udoka Azubuike from Kansas, the center. Falling to that, he's not really going to play minutes for this team, in my opinion. But of course, Steve Kerr makes those decisions. And then going to free agency, I would buy out Juan T. Anderson and then Michael Mulder. I can't pronounce his name, but those guys, they're old, not much potential. I don't see that working out. I wouldn't want them on the team, but I would be releasing them so I could make space for these free agents, which would be Bismack Biyombo on a minimum deal. That would be huge. You have a backup center because you're trading away, or I would actually have him coming off the bench and run the small ball lineup, but I'll get to that later. I think he would be a huge pickup, and he'll be cheap. He just got off a really big contract that he knows he doesn't deserve. He'll be a cheap pickup. And then Joe Harris on the mid-level exception, which is $5 million. I think that would be huge for the team. I was saying either that or Paul Millsap because he shot 40% from 3. He's a big. That's crazy. But I think Joe Harris is the perfect fit to come off the bench. But then I did disagree with your DJ Augustine I don't think he's worth $5 million. I think he knows that he's old and he's not worth $5 million. He's a minimum player. But I thought about signing him in this imaginary world, but I would bring in Avery Bradley. I brought him in last time for the Celtics, but I think that they would need to bring in Avery Bradley because Steph Curry needs some defensive relief coming off the bench. There's not, I mean, if not him, then who else would play defense? The reason I didn't sign DJ Augustine was because DJ isn't a defensive stud. I want someone to use the defensive stud, just like Avery Bradley came off that bench. But of course, my rotation would be Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, and Covington in the starting lineup with Biyombo, Denny, Joe Harris, Avery Bradley, Eric Paschal, and Kevon Looney being my rotation. But basically, that's mine. Arjun, what do you think about that?
You said that DJ Augustine. I think he's completely worth $5 million because he put up 10 and 5. That's solid. And those are solid numbers for the
solid numbers. But
like 2 years now. It's just 2 years. We're just signing him for 2 years.
But I don't think he's going to ask for that anyways. I think he's going to be a minimum player this offseason or like a $2 million player. But anyways, that'll be it for this one. We got to move on. Let's talk about CP3 to the Lakers. There's been a lot of talk about this, but before we'll dive into a lot about the Lakers doing this, but would Chris Paul to the Lakers solidify them as the consensus 2021 finals champions? Arjun, what do you think about this?
I think I can confidently say that they probably would. It probably would solidify them as consensus champions. Now, I don't think it's a good move for them. I don't think it's a good move for the Lakers because I see the Lakers as an expiring team. Let's look at their roster. They've got absolutely no youth except for Kyle Kuzma. And basically, once LeBron retires, which will be soon, the Lakers have an AD would probably want to leave, probably go to Chicago. You have a team that's probably going to be one of the worst teams in the West by the time LeBron retires, and that's maybe 4 years. I say 4 years, and this team is the last thing you want. You need to start looking at the future. The last thing you want is to have an aging $40 million contract. Chris Paul. I know he's going to ask for a lot of money. He's not $40 million. He's not going to ask for $4 million. That's my fault. But he's an aging player, and the last thing you want is another old player. You want to start building up. You got to start thinking about building up at this point.
No. Okay, I'll stop you there because I see where you're getting at, but it's also not true. Because if you're the Lakers, like if this was the Utah Jazz that had a super team, of course, because it's the Utah Jazz and that they're not a free agency destination at all. The Lakers, just like the Knicks, should never and will never rebuild. Like the Lakers after LeBron James, also considering that if you get another star, AD will probably want to keep on playing for the Lakers, especially since AD can bring in stars to LA because it's Anthony Davis. He's a star. But absolutely. Like there's obviously no debate that would solidify them as everybody's consensus champs next year. You get 2 of the 3 best players in the NBA with a superstar point guard and one of the best playmakers of all time. And did you call him an upgraded Rondo, or is that off the podcast? Either way, it was ridiculous because you called him.
I call him somewhat of an upgrade. My point was that Rondo, they already have a guy like Rondo. I think
Rondo's like a 20-point per game scorer. The benefit of not trading for Chris Paul and getting in state and keeping Rondo is because then you would have LeBron James running the floor more, which I guess you could say that's better for the team. But also if you have Chris Paul, that's not better for the team because it's Chris Paul. It's Chris Paul, dude. But then he fits all the team needs because the team really didn't have like Chris Paul. Again, he was a bench point guard. If you have Chris Paul and then you can really put LeBron James at the forward position alongside Anthony Davis, alongside Dwight Howard, whoever's on that team, that's deadly. That fits all the team needs.
Cool question. Do you think LeBron is more dangerous at the point guard position or the forward position?
I think he's more dangerous at the point guard position because he can play make, but that would be a more dangerous team, of course, if they have Chris Paul. But then carrying on my points, I think that it wouldn't be too expensive trade-wise to get Chris Paul when it comes to how much you give up. You're probably giving up Chris Paul. Actually, I'll get to that later, but that's my next thing I want to talk about. CP3, he was also welcoming a trade to LA. And also, barring injury, I think this would be or have the potential to be the best and most exciting team ever. Like, not record-wise, but like, dude, Chris Paul, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. But what do you think that the Lakers would have to give up? What's the trade package there?
Well, first of all, you'd have to give up. I would definitely give up KCP. Really, the Lakers don't have a lot of trade value. Maybe give up Kuzma. I think they could. I think
he has to be a part of that trade. He has to be a part of that trade.
Backup forward. Because there's not much to give up, really. I would just think of picks, Kuzma, and I would say Kuzma, two or three picks for Chris Paul.
Okay, so here's what I value him at in this trade. So I say that the Lakers get Chris Paul, and then the Thunder receive Danny Green, Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and 2 first-round picks. And I think this is a little too much for an aging Chris Paul, especially with his current contract. But the pros outweigh the cons for the trade. But if Isaac was here, I'd be getting flamed more. But I know you might be thinking this because earlier in a different episode, I said that Chris Paul's worth Kevin Knox and a first-round pick to the Knicks.
Not even to the Knicks. Protected pick. Like that's just
No. And that's true. I still defend that point because it's a true point. But then when you look at it's not the player, it's the team. It's because when you look at the trades for a player like Chris Paul, exactly, there's no player trade-wise like Chris Paul there is right now. Maybe Russell Westbrook, but also not Russell Westbrook. You have to look at the two things. Is the team the player is playing for selling, buying, rebuilding, or contending? And is the team CP3 is being traded to buying, selling, rebuilding, or contending? The difference between the Knicks and the Lakers is like when you're trading him to the Knicks aren't desperate for Chris Paul. Like the Knicks are a rebuilding team where you know that they're not going to be begging for Chris Paul. If they don't get Chris Paul, that's not a big deal to them. But then where there's a team that's like they're selling, they're rebuilding, they're not going to need Chris Paul. But when you look at a buying team like the Lakers, because of course they're contending, but they're also buying because they really want that third star to be comfortably in the driver's seat. That's why they ask for so much. That's why he's so valuable in a trade to the Lakers compared to the Knicks, is because in that stance, the Lakers would need to give up more because the OKC Thunder know that they're more desperate for him. So therefore, Chris Paul is more valuable. But also another reason that they would have to give up that much is so that they can make up salary space. They would have to give up Danny Green salary-wise and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They would have to sign and trade him if he declines his player option, and that would be about $20 million. But they would also have to give him Kuzma and some picks because there's not much value in Danny Green and KCP. But yeah.
I'm going to contradict you right there because I get what you're saying. I think maybe – I'm going to say 2 or 3 years, they're going to be a threat. They're going to be a champion. They're going to be a consensus championship team. Now, if I'm the Lakers, just me in general, I like to look to the future. I would look to the future if I were the Lakers. I would think about what you're doing because it's not just the fact that you'd win 2 championships and surpassing the Boston Celtics in championships. It's also about the fact that your team is going to be a steaming pile of absolute shit. You're going to give up picks. You can't afford to waste your picks because your team.
If you're the Lakers, you can. If you're the Lakers, you can afford to give up picks because you're the Lakers. Those draft picks aren't going to be that important, especially the 2022 and 2024, assuming that Anthony Davis, he signs a supermax this offseason since he declined his player option. Assuming that he's going to be there past 2024, that pick's not going to be that valuable, especially if LeBron's still playing.
He's going to sign a supermax. I don't think he's going to sign for new. I think he's going to sign like a 2-year deal.
I don't think that's true.
Davis, I think he's going to go to Chicago. He could go somewhere else.
I think that's true. I think that's a valid point. That's a valid point. I think that there's a high possibility that he goes there because. I mean, that's the same career trajectory that LeBron went down because LeBron, he couldn't find success in his original place. So he went to team up with some stars in a high marketplace. And then he wants to go and win one for his hometown. That would be dope. I would love to see him in Chicago. But then, I mean, if you get Chris Paul, the things you have to do to win the championship are just very simple. You have to, with the 28th pick, I say do not at all get near trading that 28th pick in the Chris Paul deal or any other deals that you make. And then bring back Dwight Howard on a near minimum deal because I know he'll ask for a lot, but I bet you can get him back for cheap. And then if he declines his player option, which I don't think he will, re-sign Avery Bradley. And then if you have enough room, sign Paul Millsap. That would also be huge. And then I think that team is coasting to a championship.
Okay. I'm agreeing. I think we can reach a consensus that this team will be unstoppable. Will be pretty much unstoppable if they do things right. And it's pretty easy to do things right with Chris Paul, but yeah, it's just a matter of perception and looking towards if you want to look towards the future or look towards your benefits. So,
Arjun. So before we go on to our next topic, which will probably be a little spicier, have you heard about the Derrick Rose? Would you rather see Derrick Rose than Chris Paul in LA? Because there's been a lot of rumors about that, and they'll probably sell him there for cheap. I would love, seriously, if
all NBA fans have a soft spot for Derrick Rose.
If Derrick Rose goes to LA. Everybody in the world will be a Lakers fan. Everybody will want the Lakers to win a championship. Nobody doesn't want him to win a ring. That would be beautiful, man. I would love to see him get a ring. But
Both players, both CP3 and Derrick Rose could use a ring. They haven't gotten a ring, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm a Hornets fan, but like playoffs wise, I would be a huge Lakers fan if Derrick Rose ended up on the Lakers. I would die to see him get a ring. But anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about the Knicks. We talk about them all the time, but do you think that the Knicks should pursue Russell Westbrook or should they stick to rebuilding? I'll start this one off. I'll take it. I think this is a wild shot, but I'm strong on this. I really believe this. I really think they should pick up Russell Westbrook via trade. I think that you might think it's a little crazy because you're like, oh, he's not a winning. I'm very hard on Russell Westbrook. I say he's not winning formula. He's not a winning player. And we'll talk about that later. But I think that Russell Westbrook, even though he's not a winning player, he's a perfect fit for New York right now, but he's also a stepping stone in the direction to getting stars. Because as I've said before, New York doesn't and can't rebuild. We're like, they're New York, they should get free agents, but they also can't rebuild. They're not good at it. But I think that signing Russell Westbrook or trading for Russell Westbrook would, even if you have to give up Kevin Knox and picks or whatever you have to give up, get him, because then that leads to getting players that are other superstars because they see that there's stars to get there that are already there, because nobody wants to be the first one to go to the Knicks. But once there's someone there, they'll finally start getting stars and winning. But Arjun, what do you think about this?
Okay. I see your point with bringing in superstars, but who actually wants to play with Russ? If you really think about it, no superstar really wants to play with a guy like Russ. And I see Russ as an average, like a Knicks type of player, and that's a bad thing. I don't think Russ should go to the Knicks. I think the Knicks shouldn't go for Russ because there are other superstars you can go for. The Knicks already have a bunch of contract burdens. Julius Randle is not worth $22 million.
Oh, I guess that he's in that trade.
What? Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, giving away you could give up Julius Randle. But look, they already have some pretty bad salary. They're New York. They're Madison Garden. They're New York. They have a big market. But my point is that I don't see Russell Westbrook. I don't think he should go to that kind of. He shouldn't be in a system like that. Russell Westbrook should stay in Houston. The reason why I don't think he should go to the Knicks is because I think that the Knicks need someone who's they don't need someone who's like Russell Westbrook. I think they need more of I think they need more of a guy like Paul George. We can compare Russell Westbrook to a guy who Russell Westbrook or Jimmy Butler, both guys who need like solid players. They need solid players. The Knicks don't have solid players. They have young potential. And the way I think it would cut off the rebuilding. I know the Knicks are not good at rebuilding, but I see the Knicks as a team that needs to stick with that because in reality, they're not going to – if you get Russell Westbrook, you're a near playoff team. You're going to miss the playoffs. That I would rather have them
No.
in 5 years.
You're completely wrong. You're completely wrong on that. No, you're completely wrong on that.
In 5 years or 6 years consistently, then miss the playoffs, barely miss the playoffs.
That would lead to people actually ending up in New York. People would actually end up going to New York. Not only would it be like free agents go to New York because now Russ is there, and not everybody hates Russ. People would want to play with Russ because he's generally a nice guy. His teammates all generally like him. But I think that they would also lead to the team thinking in more of a win now mindset and getting other players around Russell Westbrook. And if that doesn't work out, you can trade him. That's the worst case scenario is you trade Russell Westbrook and it doesn't work after a couple years, but he's also a perfect fit to be there. But let's move on to our next topic. We got to talk about, do you think that it's justifiable for Kawhi to take these load management games in the regular season? Now for a little bit of backstory. Of course, Pat Bev, Lou Will, and Montrezl Harrell keeps on getting leaked that they were super pissed during the season that Kawhi could just sit out of practices or miss practices and then just leave at his own occurrences. What do you think about this, Arjun?
Do you think other players are pissed off that LeBron?
No, do you
LeBron can leave practice? Kawhi, they're just kind of being crybabies. They're not. My point is that it is completely justifiable to let Kawhi be in load management. Want to know why? Because he's done it before. It's been successful. I'm not blaming. I don't think anybody should blame Kawhi for what happened this year. Blame the Clippers and, of course, Pandemic P. But blame the Clippers. Blame Doc Rivers. But don't blame your most consistent player, Kawhi Leonard. My point is that it has worked for it's worked in Toronto. It worked beautifully. They weren't a championship caliber team, but because Kawhi rested his body, he sat out most of the game. He took that team. He will that team, like I've said before, to an NBA Finals. Judging from what happened in the past, I think it's completely justified, and the Clippers are being crybabies.
Okay, no, you're completely wrong. And here's why you're wrong. So I think it's complete blasphemy that he sits out. And before I say that, I think that, of course, it's worked. It's worked in the past. It worked in San Antonio. It worked in Toronto. But when you get to LA, where, I mean, look at the season before Kawhi got there. I saw this I heard this a lot on Skip and Shannon. I like this. So when you look at it, you saw that Kawhi Leonard, he went to a team that had just went to the 8th seed and taken that fully loaded Warriors team to 6 games. They took that KD on fire, scored 50 points in a game in the series, I think. They were fully loaded. And they took them to 6 games with their best player being Lou Will, Montrez, Pat Bev. It was that 3. They established a workhorse, work hard, do everything with hard work mentality on that team. Then you come in with Kawhi Leonard and you have to prove yourself. I don't give a flying fuck what you did in Toronto, what you did in San Antonio with Tim Duncan. When you go to LA where they just established a hard working culture and you're going to miss practices before you even want anything, that's a bona fide scrub. That is a bona fide scrub.
He's a superstar. He can do whatever he wants.
But that's not a winning mentality at all. That's complete blasphemy. It's not a winning. If you want to win, you got to practice. If you want to win, we've talked a lot about chemistry in the past. We've talked about a lot about chemistry in the past, and the way to keep up chemistry is not missing practice, missing flights, all that shit.
He didn't miss practice in flight. You're acting like he did that consistently. He didn't. Like Allen Iverson said, he could have missed one practice, and everybody would have been talking about it. My point is that you're saying that it's not a winning mentality. It is a winning mentality. You're sacrificing stats. You're doing all that. You're sitting out. I get it. It sounds selfish, but you're doing all that to win in the playoffs. That is winning mentality, and that's exactly. I get that that is exactly what the Clippers are. That's their hardworking winning mentality, and he fits with that.
That's not a winning mentality. We talked a lot about chemistry in the past, and again, that's not the way you build chemistry. It's not you go into a team that's full of winning. You need to prove yourself. You can't go to LA as a superstar, no matter if you're on the Lakers or not, and then not prove yourself. He barely played in the regular season. And if they won the championship, it would have been justifiable, but it wasn't. It wasn't because they didn't win the title. They lost because of Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard was a big contributor to that team losing in the second round to the Nuggets, blowing a 3-1 lead. Is that your superstar? Is that your superstar?
You can't blame that to Kawhi. You blame that on the other Clippers players. Load management.
And Kawhi Leonard.
No, Kawhi Leonard does not deserve the blame. He played amazingly.
No. He scored 14 in Game 7. 14
that's
points.
The point. That was one game.
That's multiple games. Multiple games. He put up bad stats.
He played amazing. He did a great job.
No.
I would not blame Kawhi Leonard. I blame his team. Kawhi Leonard's load management had nothing to do with their unsuccess.
Kawhi Leonard had a lot to do with that unsuccess with on the stat sheet, like on the court and also off the court, which was missing games and establishing a bad relationship with his teammates and not getting well with his teammates, going into the bubble, barely knowing how to play with his teammates because he played about half the season with them.
No, he didn't. Okay, he didn't play half the season. He played more than that. You're over-exaggerating the load management. They played the good teams. He did get time to play his other team. He did get time to play with his teammates. You're acting like he's a stranger to LA basketball, which he's not. He just sacrificed his own playing time as a basketball player. You do also need.
He's not sacrificing his own playing time.
Let me talk for this one. You need to understand that. Think about it from the basketball perception. Kawhi obviously loves the game of basketball. For any player who's any player, it's got to be hard to not play for that long. But he's
you're acting like he's like, oh, I love playing basketball, but I'm gonna stop so I can win a championship. No, he's doing that to get rest. He's doing that to rest. He's not doing that because he's not doing that to sacrifice. He's doing that to rest.
He can play. He can
play
because
he's tired in the regular season. It's because he doesn't have enough energy in the playoffs.
That's not what happened. He's doing it for the good of the team. I keep telling you this, but you keep deflecting it. He's doing it for the good of the team. He's sacrificing. He's not doing it for himself. He's doing it for the team.
He's not sacrificing. He's not sacrificing shit. But I think we got to move on. We're kind of at a dead end on this one. But if you're in Miami's situation, trying to trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo, how much is too much to give up for him? I'll start this one off. I think that if I'm Miami, if I'm general manager, I'm Pat Riley. I'm avoiding Giannis Antetokounmpo at all costs. I don't want him on my team if I have to trade for him. If I can get him in free agency, that's beautiful. But if I have to trade anybody like Bam, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, if you're trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo, the 2-time consecutive MVP, the Defensive Player of the Year, you're going to have to give up basically everybody but Jimmy Butler that has somewhat of value and picks. And I'm not doing that. Giannis Antetokounmpo does not solidify a championship. I could see doing that for a trade package for someone like Kawhi or LeBron James, one of those guys that's won a ring, but Giannis hasn't even made it past the Eastern Conference Finals. Why would I trade my entire team besides Jimmy Butler for a guy that's never even won a ring? I know he's talented, but he's not worth a potential best center in the NBA in the years to come. Tyler Hero, who has potential to be one of the best shooting guards in the league in the years to come, a Deadeye and Duncan Robinson, who has a ton of potential, Kendrick Nunn, Goran Dragic, and a ton of picks. Why would anybody do that? I don't get that, because Giannis does not solidify a ring, and giving up all the talent on your team just to get him does not help your team at all. Okay.
I see your point with that, and I think it wouldn't be bad waiting for 1 year in free agency, but here's where I don't like what you said. You're talking about Giannis as if he's like just a normal star. This guy's a potential GOAT. He has potential to be a GOAT, the greatest of all time. I'm saying that I'm reaching. I know I'm reaching, but he has potential to be there. I think he's worth those players. But if I'm the Heat, okay, I'm gonna agree with you on the side that if I were the Heat, I wouldn't want to trade for him. I'd rather sign him because I do have a lot of cap space. But Giannis is worth those players. He's worth all of that. His worth is all that. Is it worth it should the Heat give that all up? No, because it's not worth it. But the trade is equal. It's an equal trade.
It's not, because you're giving up for a player who's probably not going to win you a championship. Because he's had because when you look at the Bucks, he's had a team that was perfectly built around him for multiple years, and he hasn't gotten out of the weak East. He has not gotten out of there. He went to Giannis Antetokounmpo, got beaten 6 games, or no, he went to Kawhi Leonard, got beaten 6 games. He's not. If you're trading for a player that's solidifying you a championship, like LeBron James, like if you trade for LeBron James, unless everybody on your team is George Hill, you're going to the finals no matter what. But Giannis isn't one of those players yet. Like maybe in a couple of years he is that player, but right now there's no signs that he's that player. He's very talented, but there's no signs that he's an automatic win column, like an automatic second win column for you.
He's not that kind. I don't think he's that player yet, but I don't care. I really don't care about that, because all I know is that this guy can average 30 to 40 points per game in the regular season. He is an absolute beast. He's a defensive player of the year and MVP, and he's completely worth that. You already have Jimmy Butler, who's a proved playoff performer. The Heat have proved themselves as a great playoff performing team. My point is that the Heat aren't a great regular season team. If you want to compare it that way, the Heat aren't a great regular season team. Adding the greatest regular season player last year, Giannis Antetokounmpo, does that
the greatest regular season player?
But does that make sense though? You're comparing it that way.
Like his trade worth is those players. His trade worth is that. But is it worth it to the Heat? Absolutely not. No way in hell that's worth it. But,
okay, I'm agreeing with you on that, but I think it's no way in hell. I just think it's okay. I think we can.
All right. So let's move on. Let's talk about the Rockets, Russell Westbrook, James Harden. Let's talk about, should the Rockets restructure or rebuild their franchise? I've actually thought about this a lot, and I've been crisscross on what my response has been a lot. You know this. I've talked about this a lot to you. But my general consensus as of now is, if they don't land Joel Embiid via trade everything, completely restart, because it's kind of like how I think the Clippers should blow it up. Like the Clippers right now, like if they've already lost chemistry with their entire team, if they lose those guys and don't get anybody in replacement around Kawhi and PG, then they don't have a future. It's the same with the Rockets. The Rockets traded a lot of their future, and it's not paying off for them. The Rockets traded Chris Paul and picks just to get Russell Westbrook, and he's not paying off for them. If they can't get Joel Embiid for a package that gives up Russell Westbrook, then trade everything. Because, maybe you keep James Harden, but that would include restructuring. I think that you need to trade for young pieces that can maybe eventually get you a ring, maybe get Cade Cunningham Green in the future, get LeBron's son, who's currently grounded off the weed. But Arjun, what do you think?
So Ben, I'm gonna ask you, just do you think so? You're saying that the Rockets, this era of the Rockets is lost. It's the hope is gone. Like they're a lost cause. They need to give up. Is that
If
what
they
you're
don't
saying?
get Joel Embiid, if they get Joel Embiid, completely restructure the team around Harden and Embiid, that'll be the best duo in the league by far.
Okay, I'm disagreeing with you on that fact that they have failed, because I think the problem with the Rockets are the structure that D'Antoni built. D'Antoni, of course, they're not the 2006 Suns or nowhere near the 2006 Suns, but in a sense, they've been a great regular season team. Take out last year. They've been a great regular season team. They've made it far. They almost beat the Warriors, but their style of play, I've talked about this before, is not going to cut it in the playoffs. It's happened time and time again. They got rid of D'Antoni, which is a good step. I say hire Billy Donovan, who's a solid player. I mean, not a solid player. He was a solid coach. He can get you the right stuff. He did a lot with the Thunder, and I'm crediting with that. So what I would do when I say restructure is get more of a – they have the talent. I'd keep Westbrook. I'd keep Harden. They're a lethal duo. But what I would change is I would actually start to try and trade away those old players. Like, say, I would definitely keep PJ Tucker, but don't get rid of Jeff Green. Get not young players, but just get better players. In my opinion, we get a big center, but the whole idea that you need to rebuild, sell the team, is complete blasphemy to me. I think
Why?
they are.
Tell me why that rebuilding, because I know James Harden is a once-in-a-lifetime talent. Ever since he's gone to the Rockets, they haven't missed the playoffs. But that's great. But they haven't won a ring. That's the problem. James Harden is not a winning player. James Harden is not a winning player, and that's why you need to get rid of him, because you can sell him very, very high. He's averaged more than 30 points the last 3 seasons, I think. You need to sell him very, very high if you don't get Joel Embiid, because Joel Embiid or a big-time center is the only way that you can win with James Harden at this point. They've tried out everything with him.
No, they haven't. They've
tried out everything. They've tried out Chris Paul. They've tried out Russ. They've tried out Dwight Howard. They've tried out basically virtually any way to win with this James Harden team, and it doesn't work. James Harden is not a championship product. He's not going to bring you a championship as a first option on a team.
Right players, if you get him the right system, if you're not D'Antoni.
What's the right system? He's tried everything.
No, they haven't. You got to just give them a chance with a new coach, to restructure the system. You tried a lot of different players, but you haven't tried new systems. You've recycled players, but you haven't got a new system. And that's where I think that they could. I'm not saying they're going to be a championship caliber team, but I'm saying that they're not ready for a rebuild. They're not at that point yet. I'd say 2 years. If 2 years don't work out, in 2 years they get Billy Donovan, nothing changes. They become a subpar 5th and 6th seed. Okay, sell the team. It's a lost cause, but they're not at that point yet.
Okay. First, I think that Billy Donovan is on the Bulls. He got signed to the Bulls, but also I think that Russell Westbrook, if you can't, no, that was a while ago. But how do you not know that?
But that's my fault. That is my fault.
Yeah. So I think that you need to trade Russell Westbrook, because Russell Westbrook, he might be best friends with James Harden, but no. I mean, Chris Paul is a surmountable amount better than Russell Westbrook when it comes to being a part of a team. I think Russell Westbrook is one of the worst players in the league that I would want to have on my team if I want to win a championship.
Which is what the Knicks argument, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think that if you can't deal Russell Westbrook for Joel Embiid or somebody that is a high caliber center, and then you restructure the lineup, but then if you don't, then there's nothing that James Harden can do. He can't win a championship as a solidified first option, but Joel Embiid is perfect because he's the best center in the league. Arguably, I don't think he is because of Nikola Jokic, but he's also a dominant in the paint guy who can get the boards for James Harden on an off night and can really dominate anybody. But anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves. Do you think that it would be smart for them to trade pick 1 to get a win now player? Arjun, what do you think?
I personally don't think it's a great idea to do that. I think they should draft Anthony Edwards. Do not draft LaMelo Ball, because the way I see it, the Timberwolves aren't going to be a threat. I mean, if you get a win now player, they're just not going to, they're not a destination that a lot of players want to go to. the reason why I'm saying this is because, Ben, I specifically remember your argument. Before this, I think you had said that try and get a winning culture before Cat leaves. The reason why that's wrong is because I think that they're still a young team. I think they're still at the rebuilding process. If you get a really good player, like a winning now player, you're going to be still going to be a subpar team. They're a terrible team. So right now, I would just keep rebuilding for them.
Okay.
It's going to be 10 years till they become
I think the Timberwolves are literally, I think they are the least successful franchise in NBA history. And I am a Hornets fan. They are worse than the Hornets all time because they have been around longer and they've won significant. Well, I mean, they still haven't won a title. When you look at Cat, there's been multiple sources that have said that Cat is as good as gone from the Timberwolves. Karl Anthony Towns he might not be the best center in the NBA, but he is a once in a while talent. He's not a once in a lifetime, but he's a once in a while talent. He's an offensive center like no other besides like Nikola Jokic, but I mean, he can shoot from anywhere. He can be physical. He can play defense. He's really a guy you need to keep around. You have D'Angelo Russell. You traded Andrew Wiggins for him, and you have Karl Anthony Towns, maybe like the third or fourth best center in the NBA. Why the hell would you draft a guy when you just drafted Jarrett Culver last year? It's suspecting that it's LaMelo Ball that you draft. Why would you not trade that for another star? You're clearly trying to get into a win now. You haven't been in a win now, but now when you traded Andrew Wiggins for D'Angelo Russell, that's a sign that you're trying to win now. You need to trade that pick for a player that you know is going to be good because they've had a lot of draft mishaps in the past, but they just need to trade this pick. I mean, there's been rumors of them trading it for Ben Simmons. That would be beautiful. They need it. I would say either if the Ben Simmons thing is a myth and won't come true, which I think that it is, because there's no way that the Sixers would give up Ben Simmons for LaMelo Ball. But if they do, then Doc Rivers is one of the stupidest people alive. But if that doesn't go through, I think Drew Holiday. Like, you get other stuff from the Pelicans in that trade, but like Drew Holiday and like another asset like Derek Favors maybe for pick 1 and James Johnson.
Okay, Ben, I think that the keeping Cat is a priority, but I think they should do. I agree that they should do whatever it takes to keep him. But you're getting the narrative wrong. They haven't had many draft the decision to draft Jarrett Culver was a pretty bad decision, but where they went wrong was the whole idea of a super team, bringing in Jimmy Butler. I thought they were going to be a super team by a couple of years. By now, they were going to be a super team, judging by the way by their past. You know what I think? Mm-hmm. I think that that really set them back, and I don't think they're going to win in any time in the future. I think what they have is fine. What D'Angelo Russell and Cat is a good duo, and I would draft another player. Now, keep on. I want to hear the rest of your argument.
Okay. So, drafting, assuming since it's general with the media that all we have with the news is that they are drafting LaMelo Ball with this pick if they don't trade it. That's terrible. That is terrible. He will make this team. I mean, they were already one of the worst, if not the worst, defensive team in the league last season. You add LaMelo Ball, who's a complete defensive mishap with no work ethic. That's terrible. Anthony Edwards, he's one hell of a player, but what help is he going to be to a team that has a ton of offense but lacks defense? Terrible. Not going to do shit for this team. I think that they need to trade this pick, but I mean, the best defensive option is drafting at pick 8 or 9, which is Onyeka Okongwu. And I mean, if you wanted to trade down there, that would be great. But drafting him at 1 would just be a waste instead of just trading down. I don't see any reason in drafting with this pick. I hope that whoever is number 1 picks LaMelo Ball so that my Hornets can end up with Anthony Edwards. But generally, I don't see a single reason in the world that unless you're trading Karl Anthony Towns, you draft with this pick. I think. Well, okay, wait. Who are your targets that you would trade this number 1 pick for?
Okay, if I were going to trade this number 1 pick, which I don't want to, but if I were, I would probably target. Well, the main problem with the Minnesota Timberwolves are their bench. So you brought up a great point with New Orleans. If I was going to trade this pick, I would go after Drew Holiday, Derek Favors, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who has shown he has potential. He's still very young,
Okay, besides Drew, I wouldn't want to trade for Devin Booker. I know a lot of people are saying Devin Booker, but again, I just said they were one of the worst defensive teams in the league in 2019 and 2020. So trading for Devin Booker, sure, it would be cool to see the three best friends on the same team, but god damn, that team would let up 170 points a night. What the hell would be the process through that? There's no reason to trade for Devin Booker there.
It's not just that. It's also the fact that their coach, Larry Saunders, is an absolute idiot.
Yes, absolutely. They need to get rid of him as soon as possible.
I think they said he's a statistically second worst coach in the league, besides Jim Boylan.
All right, yeah, let's move on. I think you've been wanting to do this one this entire time. But who would you rather have on your team, Arjun? Russell Westbrook or Paul George?
I personally would much rather have Russell Westbrook. And I think most of the audience would agree with me. Most of the audience would agree with me. You want to know what? This is pretty obvious to me, actually. And I really don't need stats. I have stats to show, but I don't think I need them. First of all, Russ is more experienced than Paul George. Russell Westbrook is more efficient. And let's look at the playoffs, actually. Through history, in the playoffs, Paul George has been terrible in the playoffs. Russell Westbrook has been way more consistent. Westbrook has a way higher rebound and assist percentage. Overall, he affects the team in a better way. Russ.
Oh, shut up. Okay, shut up. Shut the fuck up.
Did you see what he did in 2007?
Shut the fuck up.
He took a terrible team.
No.
Into the 6th seed. Russ's impact is
a great regular season player. Great regular season player. That's all I have to say about him. That is all I have to say about him. But also, Russell Westbrook is a terrible impact for your team. The fact that you would even say that he's a positive impact for your team, I've said this multiple times. I would rather have Kostas Antetokounmpo and Jared Dudley starting in my team than Russell Westbrook in the playoffs, especially. And you're falling for the public media chat, the meme trap that Paul George had a terrible performance this year. But hey, before I get into all that. Last time Paul George didn't have a clear number one option like Kawhi Leonard this year in front of him, he was an MVP finalist. And his number two was Russell Westbrook because he knew when he was on the team with Russell Westbrook, oh, this guy needs uplifted. This guy, we're not going to win if Russell Westbrook is the first option. He saw that in the year before, in his first year with Russell Westbrook. He was like, damn, we're not going to win with this bozo leading the team, so I need to take charge of this team. And then he did. And he was an MVP finalist. Let me keep on talking.
5. He had 5 points in a playoff game.
That is a playoff game. That is one playoff game. And
but you can't act like you haven't used that argument before.
Then Paul George. Okay, so Paul George had a way lesser role behind a superior player this year, and he fit the role of the second option accordingly, very accordingly. He had 7 less minutes per game and a higher 3-point and true shooting percentage, which is a great improvement from last season, which was his MVP season. But then, okay, Paul George is too much of a playoff handicap to be on my team. That is complete bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit. When you compare him to Russell Westbrook, when you look at points per game in this past playoffs, you look at Paul George, who this is apparently playoff P, worst playoff season ever. He averaged 3 more points on a higher player efficiency rating, on 7% higher true shooting percentage, on a higher win share. Russell Westbrook had negative win shares and negative win shares per 48 with 4 turnovers per game,
tell me after what
offensive rating, and 86 offensive rating, and a negative plus minus with a negative value over replacement rating. There's just total negative impact for your team. He is terrible. He is a cancer on and off the court for a team. He does not help at all.
No, he was not. He was a terrible fit for Houston with that playoffs. I don't think he's a great fit for Houston with James Harden. But you want to know why you're wrong? You're wrong because you said that Paul George actually had a good impact on their team. He obviously didn't.
He had a neutral impact
throughout his career. The only thing Paul George has ever had in the playoffs over him in any major stat category has been true shooting. Everything else Russell Westbrook has had over him.
We're not looking at the past. We're looking at the past. No. We're looking at right now.
Actually, we're looking at, we are looking at right now because Russell Westbrook had the most efficient, this is the most efficient year he has ever had in the regular season this year. That is the most efficient year. And I think this is not his best year shooting wise. Actually, 3-point wise, he's terrible now, but he can still do great things.
But when you look at it, The last time that Russell Westbrook and Paul George, they had both of them had the opportunity to be the number one option on the same team, and Paul George took it from him and was an MVP finalist that season. Paul George, last time he was his own first option on a basketball team, he was the first option and he was the MVP, like in the MVP finalists.
I'm not saying that was a great year, but we're not looking at 2018. We're looking at 2019. Paul George was
when he was the second option behind the reigning Finals MVP. Of course, he had a step down when it comes to points per game, but he didn't have an actual step down in talent.
Overall efficiency, he was terrible in the first round, terrible in the second round. He had 130.
Compare him to Russell Westbrook. He was miles better than Russell Westbrook in the playoffs this year.
No, he wasn't.
Miles better than him in the playoffs. No, do I have to say it again? 20 points per game on a higher player efficiency rating, on a higher true shooting percentage, more win shares. I mean, he had positive win shares compared to Russell Westbrook's negative. He had less turnovers, higher offensive rating. Russell Westbrook had an 86 offensive rating compared to Paul George's 104. And then, I mean, his plus minus was like 0.4, but that's miles better than his negative 3.2 for Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook is a team cancer, especially in the playoffs. And that's why he's never won anything with his great teammates in the past.
First of all, you can feed me whatever stats you want. Russell Westbrook was at his efficiency peak this year. We can completely disregard the playoffs because both players have had terrible playoff performances. Paul George had a terrible playoff performance. Russell Westbrook he had a pretty bad playoff performance. Let's look at the regular season because I always see you using the playoffs. You see the playoffs as 10 times more important than the regular season, which is No, it's not. It's not. That's the thing. The playoffs aren't 10 times more. They're more impactful than the regular season, but they're obvious. But they're really not. They're not 10 times more. Russell Westbrook was more efficient during the regular season. He averaged way more points, had a way higher percentage in every single rebound, steals, not blocks, but
because he was with a player that was A, James Harden missed time, and B, he was on a team that played a 7 seconds lineup. Of course he's going to score more points. Of course he's going to pass more, but he averaged 4 turnovers per game.
You can't make that system argument. You can make the argument that they had better players.
Paul George was the second option behind the reigning Finals MVP and Kawhi Leonard. You look at the team with James Harden that ran the 7 seconds offense that shot within like 3 seconds of every possession.
According to you, Kawhi Leonard sat out most of every game. So you're right. He sat out most of every game. So Paul George had plenty of chances.
Kawhi sat out games, and Paul George sat out games. So when Kawhi and Paul George played,
Paul George didn't load minutes. He was injured for the beginning. But you can't tell me that Paul George has has a bigger impact than Russell Westbrook.
I would take a pack of Clorox. A thing of Clorox wipes and a bag of chips over Russell Westbrook on my team. He's such a negative impact. And you said that the playoffs are not 10 times more important than the regular season. And that is blasphemy, I tell you. That is blasphemy. That is so stupid of you. The thing that the regular season doesn't matter. If you win 75 games and you lose in the first round, the 75 games don't matter because you then got swept in the first round.
Guess what? You know what does matter? The fact you're disregarding the importance, right?
Literally, look at Paul George's last time. The last time Paul George was the first option on a team, he was an MVP finalist in front of Russell Westbrook.
The first option. That's the thing. He wasn't the first option on. They would rather take Russ than Paul George. That's a magical season that he had. But you're getting the narrative. Wait. The fact that you're saying that the regular season is completely disregarded. Ben, you need to do well in the regular season to make the playoffs. You need the good playoff spot. How can you say the regular season, in my opinion, is how you that's how you become good. That's where you get a good spot.
Yeah, but if you go there and you average 17 points on 46% true shooting percentage.
I'd rather have him leading No. You can give me all those efficiency shooting stats you want. I don't care. Russell Westbrook is gonna do more for your team. He's gonna lead your team. He's a guy you can build around. Paul George, you cannot build around at this point of his career. So yeah,
you can't build around Russell Westbrook. He cancels all development for other players on his team. He completely destroys development of other players because he's a ball hog. He's a stat patter. He just doesn't want to win.
The media says he's not. He's not a stat padder. He's not a ball hogger. He's somewhat stat pads, but not in an overly negative way. He's not that kind of person. The media, he's not.
I mean, he hurts his game so much in his stat padding. He tries to be a rebounding assisting guard.
Negative. He had a negative performance in the playoffs. I'm personally taking the regular season over the playoffs, and both players are terrible playoff performance. So you can't keep giving me that negative impact stuff when Paul George had a terrible negative. But
Paul George destroyed Russell Westbrook in playoff performance this year, and you know it. You know it. I gave you the stats, and you know it.
You ask any person in the world, they would obviously tell you that Paul George was completely
that is blasphemy, complete and total
relevant in the playoffs. He was terrible for his team. My final point, I'm going to wrap this up because we've had a good amount of argument. My final point is that I would rather have Russell Westbrook on my team. I'd rather have him build around because I think Paul George is more of a liability on his team. I think I would much rather have Russell Westbrook because he can really he's the guy you can really build around. That's my closing statement.
That's why he's had Kevin Durant, Victor Oladipo, Paul George. He's had who else? James Harden. I know he wasn't in his prime, but it was James Harden. He was a great player. He's had James Harden, and he's still not won jack shit. But yeah, I mean, he's a perfect player to build around. But
terrible team.
But
and he lost the 60. Okay,
yeah, and then he played bad in the playoffs, and then he had poor efficiency in the playoffs. But let's move on. We got to move on to our last thing we got to talk about today, which is our way too early MVP picks. I'll actually start this off. My pick, which is I think actually the number one in Vegas odds, but I really hadn't looked at that until I was really researching my background to this. But I think that it's Luka Doncic. I think that he is on a system that's perfectly built for him. I think that the Mavericks, they had the number one offensive team in the NBA, but they had a lackluster defensive team. I think they'll continue to build the defense on that team this offseason since Mark Cuban's just a mastermind in all sorts of ways. I give my credits to him. But I think that, I mean, when you look at everything, Luka Doncic is averaging better stats in his first 2 years than LeBron James was and he's also in a better system with a team built around him. I mean, like, there's not much more you can ask for from a player who in his first 2 years has averaged 20 in his first season and 28 in his next, averaging a triple-double this year, basically. And this year, again, in his sophomore season, he had 4 votes for MVP. He was the 4th total in MVP voting. And again, second season. And this is my good stat. I didn't pull up his stats or anything, but I do have this really cool stat that I found on basketballreference.com, which was that he's the only player to ever have 20-plus triple-doubles before their 21st birthday, and the only 2 people to ever have 10, at least 10, were Magic Johnson and Ben Simmons. Closest one to him is Magic Johnson with 13. LeBron James had 9. I mean, he's a great player, and I expect astronomical growth from him in his junior season in the NBA, and I think he'll be a great player and be the MVP this season, but it's way too early to tell. Arshim, what do you think?
I definitely agree that Luka is he's definitely a great choice. He could be an MVP, but using the age narrative is kind of misleading because it's not about how old you are that factors into the MVP. He's super young. That means that he's going to win multiple championships throughout his career, but that doesn't mean that doesn't increase his chance of winning winning an MVP this year. Now, my pick for this for next upcoming year, I think Stephen Curry is gonna. This is very early. Remember, this is just an educated guess. We call it way too early prediction for a reason. I would say Steph Curry because I think that this guy is going to come roaring back. Now, he's maintained a steady 27 points per game for 3 years while Kevin Durant was there. Don't get me wrong, that was an amazing team, but the fact that he's managed to average that much, even with KD still there, is still amazing. Now, what? Oh,
no, I wasn't gonna interrupt you. Keep on going.
Okay, but yeah, that's my point. I think that Steph Curry has the point. I think that he has the ability to accrue 30 points per game. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because you could say that the Warriors are going to be a wash team. Andrew Wiggins is going to ball hog from which is a good argument. But I think that this is prime pickings for Steph Curry. And I think he is going to fulfill. I think a lot of this is the question for him. Are the Warriors still a championship caliber team? I think they are still a championship caliber team, and he can lead them. That's my point.
Okay, so I generally agree with you. Like, I think that that Stephen Curry is very much in that argument. I think he's a very good case for it because Steve Kerr always said that like none of the roster is guaranteed besides the big guys because the roster is not a playoff team. Like the roster is not even a playoff team right now. The team's really it's just Russ. Well, not Russ. It's Steph and Clay, and then Draymond's apparently going to have the best season of his career. Like they're obviously going to restructure the lineup, but like as of right now, Steph Curry's going to have to put up 40 for this team to be like a 4 seed in the West. Which I think that they will restructure the entire team because I never doubt the Warriors to be good in the West anymore, especially with Stephen Curry still on the team. But I think that he has a very good chance to get that. But I think that the Mavericks will be a very successful team, and I think that the NBA just generally loves Luka Doncic. I don't know. That could go either way, but it's really too early to tell, in my opinion. But I think the fact that that Luka's in an offensive system and he's a great offensive player just proves towards his case.
Okay, yeah, that's a fair argument. I think, like we've said, this is way too early to tell.
Yeah.
I think, Ben, actually, I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question. If you have give me your top 5 potential MVPs for next year.
Okay, so Luka and Steph, obviously, their numbers. I think they're the by far top 2 for this award as of right now. I think that's also what Vegas says because I mean you can see it by what we said. But I think LeBron James. I think especially if they land like a Chris Paul, because if LeBron doesn't have to distribute the ball, you can see like what LeBron did last time he didn't have to play point guard was like. What was it like Kyrie Irving and like 2013 LeBron? 2013 LeBron was like one of the greatest single seasons in NBA history. And it was because he had other good players on his like multiple other stars on his team. But I think that if you pair him up with the Chris Paul and Anthony Davis, Chris Paul is going to be throwing him dimes all game like Trace McSorley. Then I think that this team and LeBron James is obviously up there. But then my other two would be every year, James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo are going to be up there. Give me your top 5, but then give me also a dark horse to be in there.
Okay. I would go with Curry and then Luka. I would say then at 3, Giannis, because I mean, look what he's done.
Yeah.
LeBron. Now you mentioned earlier Chris Paul. I don't know about you, but I can hear the LeBron haters talk about Chris Paul and Anthony Davis carrying LeBron. But LeBron at 4. Now, number 5, I think I'm going to have to put KD. I would have put KD over. You just turned
this into a debate, didn't you? I got something to say about that. Cause like, I really hope that KD, okay, first before I don't want to seem disrespectful because like, I know that people came out disrespectful talking about this. I really hope KD comes back in his full form and has a great season with the Nets. And cause he and Kyrie at full health will be amazing. That will be one of the most entertaining teams to ever watch. I'll watch a ton of those games. But when you look at Achilles injuries, I think I've said this in past episodes. Isaac has too. There's only been one player who's fully recovered to like at least like a big shadow of what they were before the Achilles injury, and that was Dominique Wilkins. But like Kobe had that injury. There's been a lot of people with the Achilles injury that were really not the same person after that Achilles injury. Now, when you look at Kevin Durant, I think that it all goes back to that Raptors Warriors series where he shouldn't have played, but it looked really bad. And I think that if he can be like or if he can be like 80% of himself, then he can be in the MVP voting because he'll be on a team where he's the number 1 option in front of Kyrie Irving. But generally, I don't know. I think it's crazy to put him in the MVP voting. I wouldn't even like put him in my top 10. I wouldn't put him in my top anything right now. I'm waiting to judge him until the season starts because you really can't judge someone on their game after an Achilles injury because we've only seen one person ever be the same player after that. Yeah.
Now, I'm with you in the fact that I agree that you can't really tell what's going to happen, but I'm just looking at the way KD plays. He's just a pure scorer. Like he can just shoot over anybody. I don't think his game, even though Kobe was also a scorer, Kobe was also much older and he was kind of at the decline of his career. So what I would say is I think that KD could. I think he's going to be what he is at. I think we're all hoping for him.
Yeah, we're all hoping.
Look, I don't think he's going to be a 30-point per game scorer because it's going to be a steady process coming back. But I think by the time the season rolls around, maybe mid-season, some point, he's going to go back to what he was. That's just an assumption, though. I mean, he had like toothpicks for legs, so don't quote me.
I think that's it for us today. If you're still watching, if you're not subscribed, come on, man. If you're still watching and you're still subscribed, you should subscribe because clearly you like us. We like you too. Hit the like button because that really helps us get more people watching us, get you a day one pass until we blow up. But go get your merch at linktree.com/half/sport/heave. It's in the bio. And
guys, we're getting new merch too. We're getting new
merch too with our June's face on it. But anyways, sayonara, ladies. We'll see you later.